Welcome to Windows 11. The first thing you need to do is get oriented. So what are you looking at here? This bar along the bottom is called the taskbar. And on the taskbar there are a variety of elements, the most important of which is this icon right here, the little four square window icon, and that is your start button. So start button on all other versions of Windows prior to Windows 11 was always on the far left. Right now the far left is taken up by this little widget area. All right, but start button right here. Now when you click on your start button, you get a view of a bunch of pinned apps, which means just things that have been set into the default start area here right in front of you when you click on the button. And if you notice these two little dots, there's a couple of pages of pinned icons, right? So you can move between those pages by clicking on the dots or clicking on the little arrow to go to the next one. So if you have a lot of pinned items, you might have 5 pages, right? That kind of thing. Underneath recommended, you're going to see recent files and folders that you've opened, right? This is a new installation here, so nothing's been opened. There's just the get started, welcome to Windows thing. But recent files and folders, and if you've recently installed something, generally the icon will show up here. So if you installed the Chrome browser, for example, you would see the Chrome browser icon under recommended. It makes it easier to find what you've recently taken action on. All right. Now, if you want to see all your apps, you have to go to this little button right here in the top right hand corner, and when you click there, you get the full list of installed apps and all their little icons. Now some of them, like here for example, you have the little yellow folder symbol. You actually have to click on the folder and then you get the full set of icons in that folder, right? So a lot of them aren't in folders, but some of them are, right? And things that you should know about these little icons are that if you're trying to search for something that's way down in a further letter, you don't want to scroll, right? You can click on any of the letters. Here we click on G, for example, and it'll show you a highlighted map of which letters have content, right? So anything in the bold, like R, for example, here brings us back to that folder that we looked at earlier. So again, any letter, and you can jump anywhere in the alphabet and get more quickly to what you want to see. The other thing is that if you have something that you like to run into or open up a lot, you can right click on it and say pin to start, or if it's already in start, unpin from start. So what that means, of course, is that when we click on start here, that was paint, right? So here we already have the paint icon, but if it was out, say if I unpin it here and then I go back into all apps and then click on any letter, go to P, there's our paint, right click, I can pin to start, and then it will show back up, but generally at the bottom, yeah, it'll become the last item. All right, so that's a quick view of this area for getting into programs, and you just click once on any of these icons to open that actual program or app. They call them apps these days, which is different from the desktop over here. If you wanted to open Firefox from the desktop, you'd have to double click. So double click on it from the desktop, single click from start, and single click when you're looking at clicking on an icon in the taskbar. Right? A lot of people get confused about that and say they'll click twice here on Microsoft Edge and actually open 2 copies of it, right? So because they're used to, in older versions of Windows, almost everything was double click to open, right? So a lot of things now are single click. So try and keep that in mind, and that's almost certainly what's happening if you open 2 things at once. When you meant to open one, you're double clicking when you should have single clicked. Now also in your start button is your power button. So that's pretty critical to know. A lot of people can't figure out immediately how to shut down their system, right? So when you're done with Windows for the day, you can click on the start button, click on this little power icon, and then click shut down. I recommend shutting down oversleep, generally speaking, because Microsoft has never seemed to get sleep right in terms of, I do IT stuff, right? So I often have people call me up and say, this isn't working, that's not working. And what's happened is their computer's gone to sleep, but when it's awakened, not all of it has awakened. So their network card didn't wake up properly, and now they can't get online until they restart their computer and everything gets refreshed. So, and that's another thing that you should know. Okay, so you've got your little power button. Aside from shutting down, restarting is often something that you should do, particularly if you like to leave your computer on all the time, which is something that I tend to do myself. But you shouldn't let a computer run, say, for 30 days without restarting it, because what happens is programs take up bits of memory and resources, and they don't always release them, and then your computer has less and less and less to work with, and it's kind of like going crazy. Your mind is getting smaller and smaller until the system starts acting really weird. And the cure for that, so often, just restart your computer. So I tend to restart mine at least once a day, just as I'm leaving for lunch or something, just hit the restart, and then so by the time I come back, it's all up and ready to go again. Of course, you don't have to every single day. I'm not saying that it's a hard and fast rule. If you've got a lot of things open and restarting would interrupt your workflow, let it ride, but don't let it go for more than a week if you want to keep things stable. All right. So that is the start button. These other icons on the taskbar here are the default ones, at least for my region here, and you can change these and clean these up, right? So for example, I don't use the Microsoft Store very often, so I would right click and say unpin from taskbar, right? And I don't use Microsoft Teams much, so I would right click and say unpin from taskbar. But if we wanted to put something on the taskbar, we could click on start, and say a lot of people like to play solitaire, and that would be something they'd want down there, so we could right click and we can say pin to taskbar. So just as you can pin things into the start area, you can pin and unpin things from the taskbar itself. So moving on down the line into the right hand side of the taskbar, first thing we come across is this little up arrow here. If you click on that, and you may not have one depending on how many icons you have at play, but what this is like an area where they hide icons that are just for things that are just running in the background that don't necessarily always need to be visually in front of you, but need to be available. So for example, this here is Windows Security, which is the built-in antivirus for Microsoft Windows. So I can click on that little up arrow, click on that icon, and then it brings me my security at a glance here, right? So I can expand that, and when you have these little triangles with the exclamation point here, it's giving you hints, warnings, advice, that kind of thing. So you can read the notices and see whether you want to act on that, right? I won't go into all of the details of the security right now, but what I would say is, generally speaking, you don't really need to buy something like Norton Antivirus or McAfee or what have you. They do have the built-in antivirus for Windows, and generally speaking, it's pretty good. It's not the best out there, but in some ways it is, just because, say for example, McAfee is just going to keep trying to sell you more and more and more security. It's like, if you've got a club and you need a bouncer at the door, one bouncer is going to generally be fine, right? You don't need 7 bouncers. They're just going to block the door and slow things down and maybe scare away customers, right? So if that analogy works for you, I don't know, but it's kind of how I feel about third-party companies coming in and trying to oversell security to you, right? So now things that aren't in this little hidden menu are the more visible icons that we see to the left of the time and date here. So one of these is Microsoft OneDrive, which is kind of like a cloud offering for sharing files and between your different systems. So say if you have a laptop and you have a desktop and you have your OneDrive account, so you can use OneDrive to synchronize your documents and pictures and music and stuff between those two computers. So there's everything's going to be saved to the cloud, and then whenever you change something, it gets updated in the cloud, and whenever you go to the other computer and turn it on, it's going to download all the changes, so that if you're working on a book, for example, on your desktop, you've gotten up to chapter 3, you go over to your laptop, you turn it on, it synchronizes, you've got chapter 3 on your laptop without having to run around with a USB stick or a CD or whatever. So that's that thing. And here is our little language area. So I'm in Canada. The default language for PCs is the US, and so I have those two languages. You may have more, but this is how you'd switch with your mouse between languages, right? And then we have our little network icon, which tells us whether we're online or offline or whatever. This is a wired network. You may have a wireless bit there, but when you click on that, you see how both these icons get highlighted when I click. So the next one over is volume, right? So whether I click on volume or network, I get this little area here that pops up, and I can change my volume by using this slider here, and then depending on what kind of network you're on, if this was a Wi-Fi network, for example, it might have airplane mode, or this kind of thing going on, and you can change other things here like accessibility settings, and whether you want your screen to I think it could cut back on blue light, the night light thing, right? So that it doesn't interfere with your sleep. As things go later in the day, you can change the way the light comes off your monitor and make things healthier for you, that kind of thing. So this it's kind of like another widget area, but more technical than the one on the left-hand side here. And of course here we have our time and date, and right next to that we have a little notification area, that little bell here. Right now, do not disturb is on, but if that wasn't on, we might see a few notifications from Windows about things that have been happening recently, etc. And notifications do pop up just like this in the lower right-hand corner. So if the system has something to say to you, generally speaking, something will pop up in the lower right. But be careful, because people can also get notifications from websites and other third parties, generally through giving them permissions when you're using your browser, and those third parties often try to imitate your system and, for example, pretend that you've got a virus and that you have to take action right away. And basically I'm saying be wary of scams and stuff, right? So be careful what you click on and what you react to. And I guess generally speaking, the way scams tend to work is that they give such a sense of urgency, like you have to act now without thinking, right? And usually your system won't treat you quite that roughly. So that's one way to kind of tell the difference between the two. So that's a quick overview of the taskbar. Above the taskbar is what we just generally call the desktop, right? And this is the picture here is your desktop wallpaper, right, which can be changed. And then of course you have all your icons on your desktop for different software and utilities and stuff. And this whole list can change, and if you've been working on your computer for a while, basically fill up your whole screen with these kinds of things. So you get files and folders and icons to programs and stuff. So now if you want to do some tweaking of your taskbar, you can right click on it and click on taskbar settings. All right, and the first area here, let's expand this. We can maximize it with that middle button. So we can quickly go over that. So every window in Windows, generally speaking, there's going to be a few exceptions where you only see the X, right? But you're going to have the X here, which will close the window. You're going to have this icon, which you can use to maximize or restore, right? And then you see if you hover over it, you get these little options. So if I wanted to put it on the right hand side of the screen, we can do that, right? Or if you know, we want a top right corner, like so, right? And but if you just click on it once, you're going to get the maximized, right? Which is what we were after in the first place. And the one here, this is just minimized. So if you click on the little dashed line there, it'll shrink down just to the taskbar, and you see that it has this little dot under it showing that it's running, right? It's open but not visible. So we can click back on that to restore it to whatever size it was before it was minimized. So anyway, this is the settings for the taskbar. And you can actually turn things off, like so. If you don't use your search, you can turn that off. You can say, you know, hide search, and it'll disappear. Or if you don't want it to be so big, you can put search icon only, and then you'd have to click on the icon before you put in any search. One thing I would just tell you is that if you hide it, you save all that space, and you still have that search functionality. If you click on Start and you click up on the search bar at the top, you're going to get the same kind of functionality, right? So not necessarily necessary, but you know, we'll put it back to the default so that things look familiar. Now Copilot is something that's in preview. I would just turn that off for the moment myself, because you know, I generally don't like to play with things that are in beta mode, right? And we have other things that we can turn off, like we could turn off the widgets in the left if you're not interested in seeing the weather and the you know, currency conversion rates and stuff showing up on your computer all the time. And also there's this little task view button here that we can turn on and off, and I'll show you what that is. So say right now we have the taskbar settings open, and if I open, say, File Explorer here, now we have two different windows open. If I click on Task View, then it shows me a list of all the windows that are open. So if I had 12 things open, I'd have 12 little squares here. And then you see the little preview, and then you can quickly switch between them, right? So I've pulled up my File Explorer. If I go back to Task View here and click on Settings, and then I bring the settings to the front, right? So we'll close File Explorer here for the moment. So if you use that, you could leave it on. Again, if you don't, save a bit of room and turn it off, right? And another thing that a lot of people really appreciate, because they're used to older versions of Windows, is, you know, hide your widgets, right? And then come down to the bottom here where it says Taskbar Behaviors, right? And click the little arrow pointing down there, and then it has taskbar alignment, and you can choose to place the start button back on the left where your brain expects it to be, right? And another thing that I would say is very useful, here where it says combine taskbar buttons and hide labels, right? So generally by default it's on to always do that. And what that means is that, say here again, if we open File Explorer, I can open another File Explorer by right clicking and clicking on File Explorer again, and then I say I can do that a third time, and you see we still only have the one icon, although it has that little shadow of or visible edge of something behind it to show that there are some stacked. And if you want to move between the three windows that you have open, if you hover over that icon, you see the three different panels that you can just choose between them. Now, so if you know, let's go to the desktop here, and this one was on home. Let's go to music here, and let's put this one to pictures, right? So we're in these 3 different folders. Now if we go back to our settings and we switch this to never, for example, now instead of that layered file explorer icon, which visually doesn't give you a lot of information, now it actually shows me that I'm in pictures, music, and desktop. It takes a bit more room on your taskbar, but you can actually see immediately what it is, and then you can just go, oh, I want to go back to my desktop, I want to go back to my pictures, I want to go back to my music. So that's why I would say, you know, if you follow my personal preference, either choose never or when taskbar is full, which would mean that it'll show you the bigger bits until you fill up the taskbar, and then it'll start layering things. All right. So you know, your choice. I'm going to stick it back on the default for the moment, but you know, if it was my system, I would put it on never. All right. Let's close these guys off. Now, so that's an overview of the basic visuals, right? Now, if we wanted to delete an icon or rename an icon on the desktop, we would right-click and we get this menu here. And this is different than earlier versions of Windows where, say, if we had right-clicked, well, actually what we would see, I can show you what we would normally see. If I click on Show More Options now, I'm going to get that classic right-click menu where I have, you know, rename, for example, is spelled out for us, right? But now in Windows 11, if I right-click, I get this little icon for renaming, right? So a lot of the basic, most common functions, the full typed name has been replaced by these little things. So here's, if you hover over it, shows you what it is. Here's cut, right? Copy, rename, share, and delete, right? So if I wanted to just take the x64 off of Reaper here, I could delete that and hit enter. It wants admin permission. I'm going to say go ahead and continue. So I've renamed that icon. I can also right click and delete it, right? And then a handy thing to know is that if you delete something, it's going to go into your recycle bin, right? So we open up the recycle bin, which by default is going to be tucked away here in the top left-hand corner of your desktop. We can find the file in the recycle bin, right-click on it, and click on Restore. It wants to confirm that. We click on Continue, and there it is back on our desktop. Now, one of the most common things that you're going to want to do on your Windows 11 PC is jump onto the internet. And to do so, in the normal case, you're going to use Microsoft Edge, which we have down here on the taskbar. You can install Firefox or Chrome or any other browser, but you know, if you're new to Windows, you probably haven't done that, and you're going to need to start with Microsoft Edge. Now, the warning is that the first time that you open Microsoft Edge, Microsoft is going to hit you with a number of questions and offers, and it's going to be quite confusing just to get to the point where you're actually online and can do something. So let me walk you through that process here. So we're going to click on Edge, and this is the first time it's run. So, you know, welcome to Microsoft Edge, and it's going to ask you if you want to sign in to sync data, right? So syncing data is a kind of an advanced thing where if you have a desktop and a laptop, you know, work computer, you can sign in with the same Microsoft account, and your settings like your favorites and, you know, your site history, search history, that kind of thing will be synchronized across the computers so that your experience on each computer is standardized and very similar, right? But, you know, we're beginners here, so we're going to say start without your data. Right? Now it's going to ask, you know, do you always want to have access to your recent browsing data, right? Typically, I like to say no to most of these offers. So, you know, the less tracking that Microsoft does or that any third party does, you know, the less your computer has to do and the less there is to go wrong and the less other people know about every little thing that you're doing, of course. So I'm going to say don't allow and confirm and continue, right? And then here they're offering to import data from elsewhere. Again, let's forego the data synchronization stuff, say continue without this data. And then Microsoft wants to track everything you do so that they can see, how you work and how other people work, and then based on that information, ostensibly, make their offerings more useful and targeted to their customers. Again, let's reduce the complexity and the flow of data. I'm going to say don't allow and say confirm and start browsing. So you'd think that means start browsing, but not quite yet, right? So here we have they're offering different themes, right? So there's different colors, etc. If you're into having bubblegum browser or whatever, go ahead and click on one of those. But basically, I would just click finish here. Now we're actually on the web, right? So the default home page is the Microsoft Bing home page, right? Here they're asking questions. We can close. These little pop-ups in the bottom right-hand corner can be quite annoying. Anyway, so here we go. We're online. If you want to go to a particular website, like for example, if you want, instead of searching the web with Bing, if you want to go to Google, you can click in the address bar at the top here and type in google.com or whichever one, .ca, whichever you use, and you get to that site. They have their own offerings, right? So we can say stay signed out, right? There's different tabs, right? So here's another tab, which is just a Welcome to Microsoft Edge tab that automatically opened, right? We can close that by hitting the little X. But if we wanted to open our own extra tab, there's a little plus sign right here. We can open that up and we have a whole new page. So say if I went to Google on both tabs, and here on this tab, we can search for pigs, and on this tab, we can search for ducks. All right, stay signed out there. Sports ducks. I was thinking the animal, but there you go. So then you can move between the two tabs. You can even reorder the tabs. Drag one over and put them in order. So in this way, if you're doing a bit of research on something, for example, you're looking at real estate, you can open several tabs and kind of keep track of the properties you're interested in, etc. So one thing also to know is that instead of doing a search and going through the whole trying to find a page once you open a new tab, when you are on a tab, say if we're looking at the links here, and you say, okay, well the Wikipedia article would be interesting, you can right click and say open link in new tab, and it'll open in a new tab right next to the one that you're on, right? And then you can keep going down and go, oh, National Geographic Kids has something, right? Right click, open in a new tab. So now we have, these two articles on pigs that we can refer to, and of course you can just keep going and have a whole bunch of tabs open, and be able to move freely between them, right? And the other thing to know about Edge that would be most significant, I would say, is that these three little dots here is the menu for all kinds of things, right? And that's standard on Windows these days, and even on the web, you'll probably have noticed that these little three dot, I think they call them hamburger menus, but anyway, those are the menus that get you into all the extra functionality, right? So for example, if we click on those dots and we click on settings, we get a whole area here where we can tweak things. So for example, Edge has this sidebar here, which you may just find distracting as a beginner. So you could click on sidebar here and just say uncheck always show sidebar, right? And then voila, it disappears, right? And say if we want to go to a particular setting, we can say type in search, and it will give us the different elements that are relevant to search, right? And if we look for our default, say address bar and search right down here near the bottom, if we click on that, we can say which search engines we want to use by default when we search from the address bar. So right now, of course, on a Microsoft system, it's Microsoft Bing, but we could switch that to Google, right? And now, if we go and we just go to the address bar and we type in, say, horses, we get a Google result, right? So it's a quick way to enable your favorite default search engine. Speaking of settings, if you want to jump into the settings area for Windows 11 itself, right-click on the Start button and then click on Settings. Right? We can maximize that. Right? We have all these different categories where we can jump in and tweak things. Right? So, for example, Windows Update. If you click on that, you can click on Check for Updates, and Windows will, reach out to Microsoft and see what updates for Windows there happen to be. There's some advanced options for that. If we clicked on that, we can click on, this is usually off by default. I tend to turn it on, receive updates for other Microsoft products like Microsoft Office or whatever. And also, I like to be notified when a restart is required. That's usually off. I turn that on. All right. And here's an interesting area. So, if you noticed when we were on just the plain Windows Update thing, just says you're up to date, right? But when we go into advanced options, we go down to optional updates, there's 2 available, right? So if we click on that, we get these different categories, driver updates and other updates. Under driver updates, we have a display update for this system, and under other updates, we have a .NET Framework update, right? So if you find that your system is acting a little unstable, or if you just like to know that everything is as up-to-date as it can be, you can pop into this area, select those updates, and click Download and Install, right? And once you click on that, it'll bring you back to the main Windows Update area, and you'll see that the updates are downloading. Now, generally speaking, when updates are running, you can go ahead and do other things. We could close this off and just do other things while updates are running, and eventually you'll get a notification in the bottom right saying that the computer would like to restart. You don't have to restart right away. If you're writing out something, a letter, an email, or reviewing something online, you could wait, but ultimately you'll want to restart to finish the update. You saw the screen go black there. That's because one of the updates was for the display, and it's not unusual for the display to jump around while the video display driver is being updated. So now those updates are complete, and we can look around at some of the other offerings here. One you might want to jump into right away if you like things to look the way you like them to look is personalization, right? And here's where you can change background and colors and themes, etc. So if we click on background, we have the default Windows 11 swirly here is what we've been looking at so far. This is a relatively nice one. I can minimize this to show you what that looks like. One of the reasons I like this one is that it's mostly dark, and the icons on the desktop show up with their names nice and cleanly against that darker background. All right, this one looks fairly interesting as well. It looks like colorful potato chips to me. Anyway. So let's just switch back to what we've been looking at. So that's with the picture background, but you could also just choose a solid color, for example, right? So black is the default choice for that, which would just give us a nice clean black screen with that high contrast for icons and stuff. If I don't have a picture, this is the color I would prefer on my system, right? And other than that, it's a bit more advanced. I won't get into it right now, but you can set up a slideshow, or you can let Microsoft put things all over your desktop by choosing Windows Spotlight. All right, but we'll go back and just put it back to picture. And the other thing that you should know about when you have a picture as a background is you've got these fill options, right? How it's going to, I should say, fit options. The option chosen here is fill, but if you're going to fill the screen, then there's going to be no edges visible. Like if the aspect ratio is different than your monitor, you know, whichever side needs to stretch out to fill the screen is going to stretch out, and then some of the image might be cropped up. If you choose fit, then the whole image will fit, but then you might have you know, black or other colored bars on either side or on the top and bottom because of the different aspect ratio for the image versus the monitor. Then we have stretch, which would just stretch the image to exactly fit your monitor, but could distort it if the aspect ratio is off. There's also tile. So say if you had a small square image of you know, whatever, a cookie, and you had it could tile, you know, so many times across and so many times up and down, you'd have so many cookies, right? And of course we have center, which is just put it in the center of your screen at its natural size. So if it's a tiny picture, you would have a tiny picture in the center of the screen. If it was a huge picture of like a dartboard, you know, you might only see the bullseye on the dartboard, right? And we have span, which I'm not sure how that differs from the others, but you could always click on it and find out if you're playing with a picture of your own on the desktop. And then we also have different themes. Now here we have what they call contrast themes, right? And these are for those who are visually impaired or just prefer things to be very stark. So, you know, if we click on one of these, choose one of these, here's the samples here. If we choose one of these from the drop down, say aquatic, and we choose apply, then you get immediately a view of how that's going to look on your system, right? And this desert is the next one here, right? There's another option. We have dusk, we have night sky, and of course we can switch it back to none. All right, so those are what we would call accessibility themes, generally speaking. And then under related settings here we have themes, which is a set of more usual themes, not so high contrast, and I won't preview all of those, but there's a bunch on offer here, and you can also click on browse themes to get an even larger list. Now that was the new Windows 11 settings area. If you're used to the old Windows settings area, which is the control panel, that is still available. So you can click on the start button and type in the word control, and you'll see the control panel come up as an offering. If you click on that, your control panel will pop up and we can maximize that. I like to switch from category view to the small icon view, right? And then in here you can play with all kinds of things, right? So one thing that I like to do on every new system is click on mouse, right? And then here under double click speed, I pull that all the way to the left so that it's slow, because the issue there is that when it's in the middle, you have to click so fast to get, you know, this is where you can test your double clicking. Just open it, close it, right? You have to click so fast that, well, some people simply can't do it, right? So they'll be clicking and clicking and trying to open something. Like on the desktop, you have to double click on an icon to open a program, and it just won't work for them, you know, 9 times out of 10 or whatever. But if I pull that all the way to the left, suddenly, you know, they can click, make a double click at that speed, and it will work, right? So fairly important. Even if you don't need it to be slower, if you ever share your computer, it'll reduce frustration for somebody else, I'm sure. So the other bit in here is pointers for the mouse. And you can see the size, note the size of the little arrow here that I've been using, the default size. If we click on the drop down here, I like to go down to Windows Standard Extra Large, right? And then you see here a preview of what that's going to give us, and then this one that we've been using. So it's twice as big, right? So I can click Apply, and then now I have that nice large cursor or arrow. And if we go to pointer options, right, we have the pointer speed that we can adjust. Generally, I don't find that that needs adjusting, but sometimes on certain systems with certain mice, you know, every time you move your mouse a little bit, it seems to fly across the screen, right? If that's happening to you, you can pull that to the left. Generally, I wouldn't pull it all the way to the left because, you know, if we click Apply here, things start to go way too slow, right? But you know, adjust to your taste, usually just one tick at a time until you fine tune it the way that you want. Another nice option is to click on Show Location of Pointer when I press the Control key. So basically that means that when you press the Control key, you'll get this little blip, these circles that'll show you where your mouse is. So if you have trouble finding your mouse sometimes on your screen, just hit the Control key and then you'll see immediately where it has gone, right? Other things here I don't tend to tweak, but if you use the wheel on your mouse to scroll through things, you can adjust how many lines it scrolls at a time, right? If you find that it moves too fast, you could lower that. If you want it to move faster, of course, you could increase that number, right? And then we click OK, and we have our new mouse cursor, right? And of course, here in the control panel, there's all kinds of other useful options. One is power options, right? So if we jump in there, you know, there's generally different power plans on your system that you can choose. Mine's on high performance. At the moment, if you want to tweak that or see what the settings actually are, you can click on Change Plan Settings. And, you know, a typical settings here might be, you know, to turn off the display every 15 minutes, and on high performance to never put the computer to sleep. But if you have a power saving mode, it might be, you know, 20 minutes or whatever that it's going to put the computer to sleep. You don't necessarily want that to happen if every time you step away you got to come back and log in and do the whole thing, right? So if you're like me, I like to have both of these at never, and if you know, I want to save power or whatever, I can put my computer to sleep and I can turn off my monitor, right? So you would hit Save Changes to save that. And if you're on a laptop, you would see more options, because there's going to be a battery options versus you know, your plugged-in options, and you can tweak each of those accordingly. On battery, I would recommend having your computer go to sleep after a certain time, just to conserve the battery and to keep the system from just running out of juice and turning off suddenly without because it has no more power. Which is more dangerous and can corrupt your system, right? And we can go up at the top here to the breadcrumb, back to all control panel items. And another feature I would point out to you right now is programs and features. So if we click on that, it's going to show us a list of all the programs that are installed on the system. Now, that's a bit deceptive. It's not all of them. It's all of the standard style programs that we would traditionally think of as a program that's been set up on a system. But now there's a sort of a distinction between programs, which are listed here, and apps, which are things that are just accessed differently by the computer, and you might see under here. So for example, photos here, you know, I could right click and uninstall photos here from you know, the start area, but photos is not listed here in the program list, right? So say if you installed Norton antivirus, which, by the way, I don't recommend Norton Antivirus. So, I would rather see you use something else. But as I mentioned earlier, just use the Microsoft one, the free one. But that would be in this list, right? That's not an app. It's actually, full-fledged software. So you may need to manage software from here, and you may need to manage apps from the start menu. All right. And if we go back to all control panel items, other bits that would be useful to know: devices and printers. Right. That actually brings you now into the standard settings, and then you can see your printers and scanners list. Right now I don't have any physical devices, but we have the Microsoft Print to PDF printer there. And what else would be interesting here? You can tweak your sound settings. You can look at your system information. Right, see what kind of computer you have, what kind of processor, etc. So you have access to that area quickly from here. Yeah, and one more thing would be the date and time. Often that's wrong when you get a new computer and you're sitting in front of it. The time zone's wrong, or just the time, your right time zone, but the time is off by a few minutes. So you can jump in here and click on change date and time. Tweak the date, make sure the year's right. You can go month by month, etc. here, and then go into whichever area, hour, minute, second, right? And you can use the up and down bits to change the time or minutes, etc. And you can also type it in, right? So you can just type in the number, right? We'll just cancel that because it's correct on this system. And also you can change your time zone, right? So I often find that computers come set up for the wrong time zone. So just choose your correct time zone from the drop-down list. In fact, you may want to do that first. Change your time zone, because that if your time is off by 3 hours or whatever, changing your time zone may just put it right where it needs to be. Otherwise, if you're messing with this first and then you change your time zone, you're going to have to go back and mess with this again, if you know what I mean. Anyway, we can click OK there, and that's a preview of the control panel. Now, an important concept to understand in Windows is cut, copy, and paste. Now, you can do that with text, but you can also do that with files and folders and other things. So let me show you what I mean by that. So we're going to click on Start, and I'm going to type in Note, and so I can get Notepad coming up, right? And Notepad is basically a little text editor, right? Just text. There's no formatting or anything. You can't make things bold or center them or whatever. You would use WordPad for that as a default little app on Windows. But I just want to show you some things here. So this is a sentence. This is a note. This is the, oops, and there we go. Okay, so you can select things by clicking. You can hold down your mouse and dragging, right? So I have selected this whole sentence. Now, if I want to move that sentence, I can right click and I can say cut, right? And then I place my cursor wherever I want the sentence to now appear. I right click and I choose paste. So I've cut it and I've pasted it. So those words are literally from pre-computer days, when you would cut something out of a page and paste it onto another page if you're moving paragraphs or sentences around, right? So now there's also copy and paste, right? So if I select this sentence here, right click, and instead of choosing cut, I choose copy, then I can place my cursor where I want it, right click and paste, and now I get a copy of it, right? So the way that this works is that there's something called the clipboard, which is a little area of memory. When you cut something, it goes into the clipboard and it's removed from where it initially was. When you copy something, it's put into the clipboard, but it stays where it originally was, right? So now it's in the clipboard. The clipboard, unless you get a clipboard utility, is by default it's just going to hold one item, right? So if I copy one thing and then I copy another, the another thing is in the clipboard, not the first thing, right? So so when I paste, I'm only going to get the last thing that I cut or I copied, right? So keep that in mind, right? And that's just with text, right? So we can close that off there, and I can show you that this is also possible to do with files. So if I go into downloads here, I have a list of files. I'm going to right click on name at the top and choose size all columns to fit, so we can see all the full file names. And essentially we can right click on a file, and it's a little bit different here in terms of the right click menu that comes up, different than in Notepad, right? So we have little icons for cut and copy as opposed to the words. Now on older versions of Windows, if I click on show more options, we had cut and copy as full menu items, not tiny little icons. But you know, they've changed the default here, so we're going to right click, and if I say cut for Chrome setup here, and then if I go to my desktop on the left here, so here's my desktop, if I right click, and now the icon is paste, right? Another little icon to look at. You can click on that and you see that that file has been pasted into or onto the desktop, right? So on the desktop I can right click and I can click on copy, right? And then say if I go to documents, I can right click, I can choose paste again, and now I have a copy of Chrome both on the desktop and in documents. So you can do that with documents and folders as well. And you know, if you're in, like, say, Microsoft Excel doing a spreadsheet, you can copy and paste or cut and paste cells in the spreadsheet, right? So the whole idea of cut, copy, and paste works across all kinds of areas of Windows, and it's an important skill to have. Now, I've been right-clicking to do the cutting, copying, and pasting, but the default keys for those commands are, it's Control X for cut. So that means hold down your Control key, and you can just keep your finger on it, right? You keep your finger on it for 30 seconds if you like. That's the timing there isn't critical. The critical thing is, while you have your finger on that, then you tap the X, just like you're going to type in the letter X in a letter. Just hold down the Control key, tap the X, and then let go of the Control key. All right. So you don't have to try and hit them both at the same time, is what I'm trying to say. Some people get that impression, and of course it doesn't always work out, and they end up hitting the X before the Control, and well, that doesn't work so well. So hold down the Control key, tap the X, let go of the Control key. That's cut. Right? So similarly, copy is Control C for copy, and then pasting is Control V, right? So you know, for example, if I have now, I've got my Chrome setup selected in Documents, I'm going to press Control X, right? And then if I go over to Pictures here and I click on the right, so that's the active window, I go Control V, and then I get my Chrome setup has moved from Documents to Pictures, right? And then, you know, I can right click on that, and one of the little icons is delete. I can delete that, and then I can also delete it from my desktop, right? So let's have another look at the downloads here. I'll maximize this. I'm going to show you a few things about File Explorer, right? So this is the default view here. A few things you should know is that if things aren't fully readable on the left-hand side, this vertical line here is movable. So if you hover over it in just the right spot, you get this little double arrow. You can click and you can drag to give yourself more or less room, right? And then another thing is that we have all of these files, and it tells us under type what type of file it is, right? But what I like to do is click on view and then go to show and then choose or select file name extensions, right? And then instead of it just saying Firefox installer here, it now says Firefox installer .exe, right? So that's an executable file. I don't have to look over here to figure out what type of file it is. I can see immediately by the extension. And this works great for pictures. Say you've got a bunch of pictures in your pictures folder, and some of them are JPEG, some of them are GIFs, some of them are PNGs. So you got, your JPG extension, your GIF, and your PNG extension. A lot of times those things don't matter, but sometimes they really do, right? If you're creating a web page and you want, a certain kind of optimized image or whatever, it's important to know what the extension is. So I like to turn that on. Another thing that I like to turn on is go into the little hamburger menu here, and we go to options, right? And click on the view tab. If we scroll down to the bottom here, I choose expand to open folder, right? So let me drag the, by the way, when you click on the title bar of a window and drag, you can move the window around, right? So I've chosen expand to open folder, click OK, right? And then now when I'm in different folders, it's going to expand on this edge here, on this left side here, to show me that folder. So right now I'm on edge here. If I double click on application to enter this folder, it's going to expand and show me that folder that I'm in. So you'll always have a direct visual view of where you are in the structure of your file system. On the left hand side, it'll follow your movements on the right. Otherwise, all of this would have just stayed, tightly closed like this. You'd be, all the way down here, but you wouldn't have any view of where you were. And it's often the case that when you're in one folder, then you're needing to see and interact with other folders. So for example, if I wanted to pull this file just up one level, then I can see that level immediately here. So that I find very useful. And there's different views here, right? So if you click on the little down arrow on the right there, we've got our extra large icons, right? Your large icon view, your small icon view, all right? And we got a list view, which is just the file name and no additional information, right? And then the one I tend to like is the details view here. So that gives you the name, the date modified, the type, and the size, right? And you can click on any of these headings to sort by that bit, right? So now I've got them sorted by size, largest to smallest. If I click again, it'll reverse the sort, so it goes smallest to largest now. I can sort by type, so if you've got various types of files in a folder and you're looking specifically for a PDF, it'll put all the PDFs together and you'll have fewer files to search through. You can ignore all the non-PDFs, right? You can sort by date if you want to see what's the most recent or what are the oldest files, or you're just looking for something in a particular date range. Makes it much easier to find. And then of course the default sorting is by name, and you can have that go up the alphabet or down. So another thing to know is that let's just stretch this out a little bit here further. So on the left here you see this structure, and there's the little arrows, right? So when the arrow is pointing down, that means that folder is expanded, right? If I click that down arrow, it collapses the folder, right? If I want to expand, say here, the common files folder, I click on that and then it shows me the files immediately or the folders, I should say, immediately below. There could be files, but the files will never be listed on this side. This is just the folder structure, right? So, and you can keep expanding, right, to get deeper and deeper into the folder structure. So that's how you kind of walk through it, right? And another thing you should know is, let's go into documents here, for example. So you've got your documents folder, you're creating documents. By default, if you're using Microsoft Word or something similar, your documents are going to be saved in this folder, right? But you know, once you get to a few hundred files, it can get confusing just trying to find one or make sense of it all. So the thing is to create your own folder structure, right? The computer comes with a bunch of folders, but you know, you're going to want to make your own. So in that case, we're in documents. Make sure you've clicked on the right, somewhere in the white space on the right hand side, right? And then you can click on new up here in the upper left and choose folder, right? And then here you could say, you know, different categories, right? You know, click again in the white space, new folder, right? And then new folder, right? And then you can drag and drop your files into those folders from anywhere, right? If you have this area expanded on the left-hand side, you can go into another folder and drag them from that folder into these ones, right? So, and of course you can keep going and doing subfolders, right? And if you don't want to click new there, you can right click and say new folder right from in this area, right? And then, you know, right click, new folder, right? And so on. So now we have, right, your documents, repairs, laundry, and in this breadcrumb, there's so many ways to move around here, right? So you can click the little arrow between repairs and laundry, and it'll show you the other options, right? So we can click on kitchen there, for example, and now we're in the other folder. There are even some options for creating some file types when you right click. So you can right click and say new text document, right? And then you could create a document, you know, relevant to your current folder topic, right? And even here we have similar choices in the upper left corner. Now, I'm not sure why it's not actually expanding here on the left the way it normally would. Let's just try closing and reopening File Explorer here. We're going to Documents, Repairs, oh, maximize it, Kitchen. For some reason, this system is a little bit buggy. Yeah, so I just paused recording and checked on why this might be happening, and a recent update to Windows 11 has introduced this strange little bug. So I would still turn on expand to folders, but it won't necessarily always work until Microsoft fixes it. Where we should see ourselves, right, if we're in Documents, Repairs, Kitchen, is you know, under Drive C, we got Users, right, and you know, under users, you've got different usernames depending on how your system is set up. If you click on your start button, you can see what your actual username is, in this case someone else, right? So we click on that folder, and then if we go into documents, right, and we've got repairs, kitchen, that's what should have expanded, right, on the left hand side. And for some reason, won't do it today, but maybe tomorrow. So I'll just mention a little bit about right-clicking. So the thing about right-clicking is that it's context sensitive. So it depends on what you're clicking on. It depends what your menu you're going to get, right? So for example, if I right-click on this file on the desktop, I get these particular choices, right? If I right-click on the taskbar, I get these particular choices. If I right-click on the OneDrive icon here in the system tray, I get a whole other bunch of options, right? For example, I can quit OneDrive. And right-clicking, which we've already done on the Start button, gives us a bunch of options, quick access to common tasks in Windows, right? So just keep in mind that if you're not sure what to do in Windows, just try right-clicking wherever you are. So here I've right-clicked on the desktop. I could go into display settings or personalize and tweak things there. In fact, let's jump into display settings, because I will show you something that will help a lot of you. If you have a monitor, high resolution monitor on a new computer, the icons are going to seem very small compared to older, let's call classic monitors, right? And that might be too small for your comfort, right? So you can click on display resolution here and choose a different resolution. Now the highest number, it tends to be the recommended resolution for your monitor, and usually that's going to be your default, right? But if you choose some smaller numbers, you may find that everything just looks that much bigger and more visually accessible for you. So a couple of notes about that. Don't choose any numbers below 768, just because anything smaller than that, a lot of software just won't fit, right? So you'll open up a window, you'll have a bunch of settings and everything. There'll be a save button at the bottom, but because the window is taller than your 768, you can't even see the save button. You can't click on it. You don't know it's there, and you're stuck, right? So that would be the very lowest that you would want to go. And otherwise, the other thing to look out for is the aspect ratio, right? So if you have a very, say, a widescreen monitor, you don't want the number pairings that are more square, right? Because then you're going to have those black bars on the left and right hand side of your monitor, where your monitor's just not being used. So play around with the different settings and find one where the icons look a good size, but the background of your desktop fits completely on the monitor, right? And other than that, I think I can show you how to change the text size on your system, which is also something that can help for visuals. So to do that, let's start from scratch here. We're going to close that window there. We're going to right click, then click on settings, right click on the start button, of course, and then in the find a setting area here, just type in the word text and you'll see text size. All right, click on that. It'll bring you to the accessibility text size area, and there's a little slider here, right? This is a preview of how things are. So this is the default on this computer, and we can pull that until things get very large, right? So now a warning would be if you pull it all the way to the right, you'll find that in some software the text is so big it no longer fits in the space allotted to it in the software. So things are going to either overlap or be cut off, right? So you want to find some nice median compromise so that you've got the bigger text but it's not too big. What that means for you on your system will differ, so you can play around with it, but you could start by just pulling this into the middle, for example, and hitting apply. Note the size of the options here on the left when I hit apply, and see how much bigger they are, right? So for those of you with limited vision or just don't like squinting, you have the option to play around with the size of your text. Let's close that off, and we'll close off this video. Just if you have any questions, comments, etc., put them in the comment section below.